Hello, welcome back to Let's Finally Watch It. I am Lauren-Blair Donovan.
And I'm Canez.
And this is my dog, Lady Grimaldi, and we are going to watch a movie today that I have not seen, and I'm finally going to watch it, but Clark here has, and that movie is The Shining.
Yes, it's a classic.
Stephen King, right?
Stephen King, yes, wrote it. But famously does not like the movie.
Oh, I think I have heard that, but I never went down that rabbit hole. That just sounds familiar because I haven't seen the movie. But this is like one of those movies that's also very in culture. So I understand that there's creepy ass twins at the end of hallways. Yeah. I understand Jack Nicholson is on the brink of a mental breakdown, basically.
But that can also just be Jack Nicholson.
Yeah. So I'm not from Colorado, but I moved here from Colorado, so I often say I'm from Colorado, even though I'm from Pennsylvania. But the Stanley Hotel, wait, which one? Is that the fictitious one, or is that the real one? Now I'm forgetting.
That's the real one.
Okay, the real one. Sorry, for a second. We're in the middle of the heat wave still when we're doing all this, so my brain is sometimes melted in this heat wave. The Stanley Hotel is in Estes Park, or near Estes Park, and it's a beautiful town. I love that town. And a lot of people would do like bachelorette parties there. Like, let's rent a room and see if we get haunted. And I'm like, you couldn't pay me all the money in the world. Because I'm the type of person that doesn't believe in ghosts until you tell me we're in a haunted place. And then I'm scared witless. Like, I'm not a fan. So I feel like I not grew up, but like before I moved here, just a lot of folklore about, you know, the Stanley Hotel in general, and I'd get little tidbits. So I'm curious to see this movie that I feel like I can reference in bullshit that I've seen when I have not.
Yes. This one's, there's so many iconic scenes in it that it's like an easy one to just be like, oh yeah, I've seen it. I have. You know, what you just listed right now.
All you're gonna say is twins.
Yeah. Oh man, wasn't that scary? Oh boy. Yeah, it's and yeah, the Stanley Hotel, it definitely plays a big part in this movie. It's beautiful. It's also Stanley Kubrick, which, you know, he's a very meticulous director. So it looks beautiful all the time. Like it's so well done, and it's one of it's a very good, like, scary movie. It isn't scary.
Usually I'm not a fan of scary movies, but this one is so iconic that I'm actually excited for. Yeah. And I'm curious because this is from the 70s, right?
Or shoot, maybe early 80s. Damn, it's one of those late 70s, early 80s.
It's from the disco era,
yes,
give or take.
Exactly.
The roller skating era, and because that's what I think of when I think of The Shining. I think of discotheques and roller skating. But yeah, same era, and I'm curious because I know, I mean, obviously The Exorcist is from that time too, and it is very scary, but I also feel like so many contemporary horror films are so bloody and like shocking for shocking's sake. So I'm more, if I'm gonna watch a horror movie, it's gonna be from the 20th century. And enjoy it. Because like I like House on Haunted Hill from like the 30s. I like anything with Vincent Price probably. And then some, like, I've seen The Exorcist a lot of times. You would think it'd be a movie that I haven't seen, but
shocking.
I started watching it as like a 10-year-old, and like it was really scared, but it was I was really scared, but it was also I don't know, it was like a thing, you know, and I don't know, somehow all my friends started watching it too, and there's also some great quotable things if you want to be a rebel 14-year-old and say like that your mother sucks cocks in hell.
Exactly.
In the voice, you know, like.
You scared her.
Sorry. Still your mommy. But you know, it's like there's. I think that's the thing. Like with some of those older movies, whether they're so old and Vincent Price and it's in black and white and you can't even really tell that it's real blood or not, or whether it's like there's just these like funny things that give it texture, like half the things in The Exorcist, like they're just not as scary, even if they are scary, because The Exorcist is very scary. And I know The Shining is scary, but I know that there's going to be other dimensions to it that are going to make it not just me hiding under the covers watching it the whole time. Does that make sense?
No, it's the difference between like being scared and dreading. So I feel like the movies that you're talking about, they focus more on dread than fear, which is which I think is two different things, to be honest. And so I think this one, if you like Exorcist, that's all I'm gonna say about that.
All right. Anything you want to add before we go finally watch it? Because I think that's all I have to say on it. I don't think I just know it's about a man who may or may not be a writer who's in a hotel.
Sure. Okay.
And then there's creepy-ass twins.
Hey,
and it's based on the Stanley Hotel and Stephen King's experience being there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess like another bit of the backstory, it does divert a lot from the book. So I think
is
that's
that
the
why
problem.
Stephen King doesn't like it?
Yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't blame him. That would piss me off too.
I get it, knowing the book, because I read half the book in school.
Quitter.
Well, no, it was weird because it was like, in language arts how you have silent sustained reading.
Yeah.
I just like I read relatively fast, but like the school year ended and I didn't get to finish the rest of it,
That's
which
such
is
a
so
fun
dumb.
story.
I know, and
I weirdly
probably
like that because it's so believable that that does happen, but you just don't hear that.
I feel like it was. I feel like they should have kept going, and my mom loves this book. There's also a sequel to it, not known as widely. It's called Dr. Sleep. And I'll talk about that more later because that does relate to this. Okay. But what I do like about Dr. Sleep, and I do recommend that movie because it really bridges the gap between the book and the movie.
Okay.
So and also another thing about The Shining, there's also a Stephen King approved miniseries that was on ABC. I think.
Wait, they did like a mini-series that was basically an adaptation of the book, but it wasn't related to the movie at all. It was just its own, kind of like how what would be a good example? Because I feel like a lot of stories get told a lot. Like if a celebrity dies, there'll be like multiple biopics or something like that. So kind of like that. It just based on a book, not a celebrity's death.
Exactly. So I think what it was is Stephen King wanted to be like, hey, that other one went off the rails. Stanley Kubrick did what he wanted to do, and to good effect. I get not liking it. It's still a good movie, though. And it brought you a lot of fame and money, probably. So so the movie, the miniseries that was on Channel 7, I always say Channel 7, it was on ABC. I always say that. Well, because
we had Channel 6 in Pennsylvania.
Okay. But actually throughout the 90s and the early 2000s, Stephen King always had like a mini series come out, like The Stand.
That sounds right. I don't think I saw any of them, but I do remember the advertisements.
Yeah,
bit. Not a lot bit, but a little bit.
Right. So it was really, actually that was a great time because it would be like, it would be longer than a movie, so you'd be able to expand. So I do get why he was like, oh, I want to expand the story out. Was it good? I watched it, and it's not as good as the movie, but it's interesting that But I'm excited for you to watch it. I hope. Please do not pee yourself.
You know what? That's usually the daily goal. So, mission challenge accepted.
No, I don't think you will. I don't think it's definitely dreadful, but not.
Yeah. All right, I'm excited. I'm not always a big fan of horror, but this is one of the few that I'm like very much willing to watch because it's about, in the words of Lizzo, it's about damn time.
It really is about damn time.
I'm like half past, should have seen it 12 years ago. So.
You don't have to lie anymore.
Yeah, I don't have to just keep quoting twins. There's like a tricycle too at one point. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. See, I can bullshit. I could live to 80 and I could keep bullshitting it, but we're not going to do that. I'm gonna finally be an honest woman and see The Shining.
You got it.
Because that's what that means.
Okay. Yeah.
Woo! Okay. great. We're getting loopy now. So we're gonna go finally watch it. Bye.
Bye.
And we are back. I have seen The Shining, but more importantly, we have our first special guest today, Ryan Parsons.
Thank you very much, you both, for having me.
Yay! He
Ryan
is
Parsons.
horror movie aficionado.
I never get to talk about horror movies, so I'm like a boxer right now. I'm ready to go.
Love it.
Awesome.
Love
yeah.
it.
You could talk about horror movies with me all day. Her only.
That's how we met, though, because we work on the same show. That's a video essay, Deep Cuts, shameless plug. Matt Canezano and a puppet talk about B horror movies. Is that correct? I'm not a horror movie aficionado.
That's accurate.
Yeah, so that's how we met. So I'm like, oh, Ryan's got to be on for The Shining, because you were also saying, I think if I'm remembering correctly, you thought it was the weirdest that I hadn't seen The Shining. Like out of all the movies, you were like,
no,
whoa.
I remember you asking me what's the weirdest movie on this list, and I thought you meant like most abstract.
Oh,
that's why I said it's The Shining's the weirdest.
Okay,
not the most strange that you have.
My bad. But you do love this movie, right? Like
I do.
Okay,
I have a lot of nostalgia wrapped up in this, so yeah, it's one of my tip-top favorites.
Well, let's start there. I want to know, why is it your favorite? Because I've seen it in a 2022 lens. I mostly am fine with it. I have some observations, but I want to hear, what's it like to see this movie before now? With both of you, I suppose, but we'll start with you.
Okay. This movie came on my radar when I was about 6. This girl, Colleen, in the 1st grade, she told us all about The Shining. She was also like, she'd open the encyclopedia and read about penises and vaginas to us too.
This is the edgiest first grader I've ever heard of. Oh my god, that's like a lot.
She rolled pretty deep for a 1st grader, yeah. And I was so scared by her description, I wouldn't go in the bathroom. I wouldn't go near the bath. And then my mom thought I don't know why, she thought it'd be a good idea to just show me the movie.
Immersion therapy.
Yeah, I guess.
You know what I say about that, though? I do agree with that sentiment, though. Because my mind will race of the worst thing possible.
Right.
Like, if anybody, like, recently my family, we had, like, a family meeting, and it was fine. It was just about, like, Disney World. But
That's
I thought...
family meeting.
Yeah, but I was like, since I didn't know what the family meeting was about, I thought it was, it was something bad. And yeah, so I think it's actually a good thing that you were just like, okay. I mean, it's terrifying, scary, but your mind could do a lot worse, I feel.
I agree, yeah. And I did like it. I don't think I was afraid of it after that.
Wow.
And they maybe were kind of irresponsible. I saw like Terminator 2, The Fog.
You guys would have been friends as kids, I feel like.
100%.
Yeah.
Probably,
yes.
yeah.
Oh,
similar childhoods is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I mean, because like, yeah, exactly. Like, because my parents, they didn't want me to watch anything scary, but I would always go with my friends or my cousins. Yeah. And then, that's when I would watch all that stuff, and it would be like, oh. So it wasn't, for me, it wasn't like necessarily that my parents, I had nightmares all the time, so like, but what's funny is horror actually fixes my nightmares, which is the weirdest thing, but like, but yeah, so I feel like we grew up very similar. Going to the video store and seeing all the covers and everything. Yeah.
Yes, I saw so many covers, and I would just think like, what could that possibly be about?
Right.
The Blob and the Elephant Man both looked really scary.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to watch both of them.
Right, exactly. And sometimes, I mean, that kind of goes with the thing. Like, I used to be afraid of this one movie called House 2. It's the one where there's like a skeleton hand ringing a doorbell.
Yeah.
So that used to always be in my head. I actually saw it relatively recently, within the last 5 years. It is the goofiest fucking movie I've ever seen in my life. I thought it was going to be like the scariest thing I would ever see, but it was goofy and my mind raced, and so that's fun. So did your parents watch it with you, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's okay. Yeah, I guess that's more responsible. I guess. Yeah, responsible.
We'll let a 6-year-old watch it by himself in a room and see what happens.
Yeah. And so it really left an impression on you then. Yeah.
It did. Yeah. I've always kind of, been aware of whenever it kind of pops up in pop culture, the twins and the Here's Johnny and stuff like that. Yeah.
That's fun. Then it's a childhood memory with you. That's part of the nostalgia and why you love.
That's part of my continuing affection for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then you.
And then so my relationship with it is I just remember this relatively recently. I think as we were watching it, I watched only the ending, probably around the same age that you watched it. But I only watched the ending, the most
the most intense
part. That's all I watched.
Oh my God.
Nothing leading up to it. So I just only had that frame of reference. And then I read the book, or I was starting to read the book, like I said in the preview review. And then the school term ended, and I stopped reading The Shining. And then I watched it later, and I was like, oh. This is that, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and but yeah. So, like, as you've grown with it, do you feel like you've noticed new things about it or anything?
I think maybe I've realized more what exactly about it works on me. Because going in kind of for the first time, I mean, it was scary. That's about all I knew. But getting older and, watching it regularly over the years, I start to, as one does, you kind of pick apart, like, oh, wow, this editing in particular is really, like, aiding.
Ryan went to film school, too. That's also
that's like being generous, describing it as film school.
Oh, I thought you did.
A little bit.
Okay.
I dabbled.
I was in one of his films, so
that's right,
I met all his film friends from school, so that's where I got that from.
Right.
But you study film, like you make films,
yeah.
It's a different lens, anyway. But yeah.
No pun intended.
I hope we have more puns. Pun alerts. Has that inspired you? Like, was that one of your big inspirations then?
The Shining specifically?
Yeah, I guess.
That's kind of hard to say.
Okay.
I'm almost positive it has some way or another. I think most people these days who are filmmakers, probably whether they like it or not, Stanley Kubrick has probably inspired them one way or another, unconsciously or otherwise.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, because I was having a discussion with somebody, I feel like this week, that they were like, oh, I hate Stanley Kubrick. And I do get the sentiment, but I feel like those are people who are kind of like impatient about film. You know what I mean? Like
a little bit, yeah. I can see that.
And really, I mean, we'll get to it, but seeing it for the first time in like the 2020s, or it might be a little different, especially the way that storytelling is.
Yeah.
And after 40 years or so.
Right. Yeah, totally. What's interesting, like, I think with my reaction to it is there's so many things I do appreciate about it. Like, I think it's good art because I've been thinking about it. And we saw this, 2 weeks ago? We all watched it together, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I've thought about it most days. That is good art. It left an impression, but I don't know what I'm thinking about it, which is also good art. You know what I mean? Like, in its own way. But some of the storytelling, I didn't mind that it was slow. I like the cinematography. I like how it was structured, even though at a certain point with all the titles where it's winter or Tuesday and then it's Friday and then it's Monday and I'm losing track of what just say next week or a few days later. Not literally, that's not really a grievance, but at a certain point I'm I don't really know where we are. I just feel like it's all happening faster and faster. But there were some things we had to stop the movie once or twice because I was what's happening? Or can someone explain? Just because I just wanted to have the right context, But honestly, I think my biggest problems with it were two things. One is Shelley Duvall's character was very one-dimensional. She's a great actress, but the way it was written was I was telling Ryan this before you came. I was we talk a lot about the Bechdel test and how if movies can exist without, about a woman and she's doing anything more than wanting a relationship or talking about a relationship or a man or whatever. I think we don't give enough of a spotlight to movies, especially from the 20th century when film was like solidifying as like a storytelling form, and how that's gotten into all of us. There's so many women that are just wives and mothers. Mm-hmm. It's not quite the same as like the Bechdel test, but it's like adjacent to it or a cousin to it. And I think any movie that we watch that's like a few decades old, I have the feeling I'm going to start sounding like a broken record. And like just as a woman pointing that out and be like, this is why we're kind of in the mess we're in, and this is why like things are thankfully changing, but it's still kind of scary. So she did such a good job with the part, so I'm not mad at her, but mm-hmm. It was hard to watch. Also, she was in like a pretty abusive marriage even before he went apeshit. You know, he was very emotionally alienating, and that's just hard to watch. But that was the other thing too, though. Jack Nicholson, we all have some hot takes on this. Good actor. I hated the character. From the jump, my skin was crawling. I did not like him. Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit off screen about how maybe it shouldn't have been Jack Nicholson playing this character, as good of a job as he did being Psycho. He mm-hmm. was not a relatable, nice guy that you would root for. There was nothing grounded. There was no arc. He just was like crazy and then batshit crazy. Yeah. And I didn't like, he made my skin crawl, which I guess was the point, but I wish he was more relatable in the beginning.
Right. And that's always been my issue with it, is him. Also, I mean, like, and going back to it, I guess, like my first viewing of only the second half of the movie, I think when I watched it in high school, I was like, oh, okay. So it's going to build up to, you know, because I was like, I started figuring out this is the movie that I had watched, you know, like there are little bits here and there, but I really felt like, okay, it's going to start slowly, just like, the thing is they took their time with almost everything else. Yeah. They took their time in setting up the space, setting up where they were, how they got there. They set a lot of that stuff up, but I think with him, it was just so fast. Not to say that it was even like. So I guess the way I watched it, just watching the second half was probably the way to watch it, I guess.
See the thespian at work and with no other context, yeah.
I mean, because the thing is, I think he's great at being unhinged. I mean, there's nobody better.
No, he does it the best for sure.
Yeah. So I think that there is an element of that, but also going back to like the book, the book it definitely does start off in, you know, a slower trajectory instead of like rocketing up into the atmosphere.
Right, like he seemed like a prick even without falling off the wagon mm-hmm. and this like supernatural stuff happening. Like he just, I don't know, like he was barking at his wife even before they went crazy, and like she's feeding him breakfast in bed and he was sticking his tongue out, and like he was very emotionally neglectful to his son. Like it was just like I'm not on this guy's side, like mm-hmm. at all. Skin crawling from the jump.
And I think maybe that's why Stephen King was maybe upset about the movie. I mean, there's probably a few things that he was upset about, but I think maybe that might have been one of the bigger issues that he had with it, was Jack Nicholson. Because I think, so going back to the miniseries, on the one that they had on ABC, they had Steven Weber from Wings. I don't know if you guys know that actor. Yeah, and
that's a relatable dude, though. Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Is like, even though of course, it wasn't that. I mean, it was on TV, so it wasn't like that great. But I really do think that it was kind of like, oh, okay. So having a guy named, you know, like Steven Weber, like, okay, you could kind of see where he goes crazy instead of it's just like already predisposed to it or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Like halfway through the movie, I was thinking about actors that were around the same age or like a dad age at least at that time, and I recast Jack Nicholson as Kevin Kline.
Yeah, Kevin Kline, yeah.
He's another nice, relatable dude with a big range though, you know, and I would love to see him go apeshit.
Yeah, because I was even thinking like Harrison Ford or something, because he would have been in his 30s. Yeah,
that's a good choice.
Yeah.
How about Burt Reynolds?
That would have been fun.
Yeah, actually.
I don't know if I love it, but I don't dislike it.
No,
like,
no, thinking about that, I think Burt Reynolds would have been pretty good.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
Who would you guys cast these, or back then, as a replacement for Shelley Duvall?
I just want her to be
Better written.
Yeah, better written.
Right.
I did eyeball a note I had though about her where it's like Wendy, that was her character, doesn't have a Vermont accent. Like she was very Southern sounding to me, like not New England sounding.
Oh,
and they kept talking. Well, they were talking about they were from Vermont, which doesn't mean that she wasn't from somewhere else and then hooked up with this guy. But I don't know. The only thing that I didn't love about her, and this is kind of dicey because I don't like commenting on. I don't know, but like she was a little triggering for. She's so waif-like, so. And then watching her get like yelled at and attacked the whole time, like just it made me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But that's my own issues. But would you guys recast her? I don't know if I have a good answer because I did like her performance and it was really the way it was written.
Yeah.
But do you guys?
Sigourney Weaver.
That's
I mean,
I'm
I'm always gonna say Sigourney Weaver for anything. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
For the character written, I thought she was just perfect.
Yeah.
yeah.
The book, she's more of like a normal, well-adjusted person. I mean, there's abuse kind of shading her character, but I think Stephen King's idea, differing from Kubrick's, was like putting a normal person in this situation who hasn't really, who doesn't look sort of like she's probably been through a lot or expects bad things to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, as written, I think waifish Shelley is just,
Yeah.
It's cool. It was just I was just like, oh my god, she's probably like got so many demons being married to this man, possibly an eating disorder. So like, I don't know. Not that you get an eating disorder by abuse, but it can be a trauma response. So I don't know. That was the whole thing with me. But yeah, I do wish that I did like though, actually, that she was sort of the one that saved the day.
Yeah.
I didn't see that part totally coming. Like I didn't know who was going to live, who was going to die for the most part. But I was like, oh, she did save her and her child. That's actually a pretty boss move, especially for that era in film. So I was like, all right.
She also won against her husband and a bunch of fucking ghosts. So I mean, she really
badass.
Yeah. So I don't think and that kind of is almost like conquering whatever that feeling that people have in a relationship like that, and. Yeah.
How do you guys feel about the child actor?
I like him. I mean, there's only a certain time where like kids look like that. I don't know. Like I just like kids just don't look like that for some reason anymore. But I thought he was good. I mean, it was a crazy role. I don't know how that kid executed these. Like, what was the direction that they gave the kid? Because
was he okay after the fact? Like, what was his aftercare?
Right.
It's insane.
I read that he really didn't have any concept of the horror. So it was just kind of, they were just kind of playing things in snippets without real context for him.
So he was just being a kid and being playful, basically. Yeah. Oh, that's fun.
That's actually good. I mean, considering what I've read about Stanley Kubrick,
probably the best treated actor who's ever worked with Stanley.
Yeah, for sure. That's not his usual.
That's good.
That's so interesting though. But I do think I think that character has to be just. I mean, it reminded me. Wait, did you see Sixth Sense? Okay. I mean, like Haley Joel Osment in Sixth Sense, where he's like dealing with stuff that nobody else could understand.
Yeah.
And can't help but being kind of weird because of that, so I thought he was good. Yeah. At
first I was like, oh, I hate this kid. I hate him so much. He's precocious. And then I was like, probably about 30 minutes in, I'm like, he's a genius thespian. Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And he was so creepy when he was really in that like state. I was like so bothered and uncomfortable. And like that's what I keep thinking about to some extent. So I'm like, that was just well done because I keep thinking about it. So crazy though. Like, I didn't realize that the kid was going to be creepy. I didn't realize it was a creepy kid movie. Besides the twins, I knew there was twins in it, but I didn't know that like the kid was part of the haunting.
Right, exactly. Yeah, but he is, and he's almost in some ways like. Because I mean, we've talked about like the theories of what's going on in there, and I think like most of the energy is coming from him, like reigniting all whatever specters are inhabiting that hotel, and so and unknowingly so, like he doesn't want that to happen, but it's just like, you know, these specters feeding off of him in a lot of ways.
Dick Halloran. Is very powerful with The Shining, and he's there, but being an adult, he's probably very practiced at ignoring those things.
Right.
And yeah, just a little kid wandering in.
He's the one that like confronted the kid, was like, oh,
yeah,
you see,
yeah.
What's up, Doc?
And him just having no context of really the powers that he has.
Yeah. And that's, you know, that kind of does, I mean, because that kind of goes back to, you know, the theory of like poltergeists. Like poltergeists aren't necessarily dead people who came back to life. It is psychic energy from usually a young person going through puberty or whatever. Like that's usually where it almost is like a psychic energy, and you know whatever feeds off of it kind of like turns it into, it activates it basically. So I do think that there might be I think you're completely right about that. And I wonder if it would have been different if Dick would have just stayed. Yeah, I mean I always think about that. I'm like, why didn't he just stay? Or like he could have been the caretaker or something, you know?
Well, he probably wants to go to Miami.
Fair enough. Yeah. Hang out with his like topless photos.
Oh yeah, velvet paintings of topless women.
Yeah, that was a choice.
Yeah.
But like that was the other. I think my biggest disconnect, which is weird considering how bananas the movie is, but I'm like, I understand why that hotel was shut down for so long. Like snow, it's not passable, whatever. But like, they hire a random ass family to just keep it alive. Like that's kind of an insane job. That's an insane amount of responsibility.
Yeah.
You would think someone that works at the hotel, maybe not Dick, but someone like Dick would get overtime for being there all year. Like that, if it's a seasonal job, you would think someone would be like, oh no, yeah, I want to stay. Like to me, the job description just didn't feel real. It's like roam this huge hotel, eat all of our frozen food. Yeah. You can't leave for months because the roads are impassable.
I've seen listings like that. Like there was one time where I was like, but it was in the desert. Wouldn't have been my favorite thing, but it was kind of like if you're a writer. It looked specifically there, like if you're a writer or something.
So this is a real job.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It was like in Idlewild or something, and I was like, that would be interesting.
Was it at a hotel that you were just gonna like?
It was like at like kind of like a motelish place, but it was like during like the off season, I guess. So yeah, it does exist, and that was in California. So I imagine they probably do, and I do think that they. And then I also had a friend who did a similar thing in Alaska, actually, where they had like research facilities, but you know, I mean, he did some of that, but he had to stay behind and like make sure to heat everything, or else like everything would get messed up with the cold or whatever. But I think they prefer families.
I guess you don't go insane in solitary confinement. Or...
Yeah, and that was one of the other things about that listing that I had seen. It was just a dumb job listing for that. I only consider it for literally 3 seconds, but they were actually saying it would be best for a couple. Like they're like, we prefer couples, and I was like, okay, that's interesting to think about. So
no caveats. You're offered the same job as Jack and his family in The Shining. Would you take it?
How many months is it?
I think it was like 4 or 5.
It may have been more than that, because wasn't it like end of fall and they weren't going to open until May or something? It felt like a long time when it was being described, but I might be wrong.
Because
Colorado winters are from fall to like almost early June.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't know. I think it would be neat to like work on stuff. Yeah, I wouldn't mind taking a little break. Yeah,
I would with
you?
caveats.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't want it to be that long, and I wouldn't want it to be like that big of a place or that remote of a place.
Mm-hmm.
I want a house sit, I think, is what it is. I don't want a hotel sit.
Right.
I don't know. I get the appeal of it, especially as a writer, but I just think they would just get creepy. Or what if someone does wander in from the woods or the snow? As a woman, I don't want to be there for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know.
Right.
Well, we're going. It's a package deal with 3 of us.
Oh,
Fine.
yes.
I'll do it with you two
Right.
then.
Okay.
Fine. I'll have 2 men to protect me and a pretend guard dog.
Yeah. I know it is really daunting, and I don't know. I mean, Stephen King must have maybe even heard something like that.
Maybe.
Like, I mean, you know, yeah, and even when you're seeing them drive into it, it's like, holy shit, yeah.
That's like deep Colorado. Like the Stanley Hotel is like in Estes Park, Colorado, which is like a little bit, if I'm getting the directions right, because highways are just highways to me and I don't have a great direction, but on the map I'm pretty sure it's like just a little north, maybe northwest of like Boulder or like Fort Collins, I think, closer to Fort Collins actually. And like, I don't think I saw the Stanley Hotel, but I've been to Estes Park and it's accessible. Like, there's tons of main roads, and like if it is up the mountain or something, I don't think it's as grandiose as like those beginning shots.
Yeah.
And, like, those are like deep mountains that like even like Aspen or other like ski towns, like they're accessible. Like they might close for like a weekend, like the highways or something. Like there's a blizzard, but how far away was this hotel in Stephen King's world? Like, it was not based in reality, I think is what I'm trying to say. Being a former Colorado resident, you know, I was like, a lot of this is sort of exaggerated, especially for the geography that they're talking. And when Dick landed and like the time frame that in the highways he was using, I'm like, those are not correct to get to where it was from the origin of inspiration, at least. But
I mean, California is always maligned with our distances. It's like, oh, they wouldn't have been in like watching Clueless. I'm like, oh, they wouldn't have made it. They wouldn't have gone there by 10. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So I do, but also you're getting it from a person who's foreign. It's foreign to them, you know. Because I was just talking to my friend Jen, and we were talking about. She was asking me, do you really think like my family's home is in the country? And I'm like, for me, yeah, 100%. Like, if I'm
she's
trying
from
to,
Pennsylvania.
she's
like
from
me.
Pennsylvania, and I'm trying to imagine it right now, and I'm like, oh yeah, you had to drive like, and then probably for them it was probably like, oh, it was like, you know, 4 or 5 miles from the main like downtown area, but for me it was like 15, 20.
Right.
So I think, you know. And also, you have to make it a little scary. You have to stick a little scariness in it. Yeah. But yeah. So.
Would you do it though? Would you say?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I'll learn how to fix a boiler.
I would be good. I don't have any skills. That's the other part that I'm like, friends maybe. But
You know what? That was the other thing is Wendy was doing all of the maintenance. She did everything.
Yeah.
He was just obviously not typing anything coherent. And she was over there fixing the boiler. She was putting them on.
making him breakfast, like doing the child rearing. Like, it was a triggering movie in a lot of ways.
For sure. But I mean, but also at the same time, like, it is triggering, but it's also the reality of that time.
That's fair.
I mean, you could, if you were to do it any other way, it wouldn't be realistic.
That's true. That's totally true.
Yeah. But, yeah, let's get to the spooky parts. What were were there, okay, for you, was there any, like, jump scares? Were you ever like, oh, shit, fuck?
Almost no.
Okay.
You know, which surprised me, and I think it speaks to, it's a 40-year-old movie, So I understood when the music was playing, I'm like, this is a device. This has been perfected. I have fallen for this before. Not this time today, Kubrick, not this time. So I was surprised at how not scary. Like psychologically, I think it's scary, but like I didn't actually get that scared. And I'm a wimp when it comes to horror movies. So like I was surprised at how not scared I was. But I feel like towards the end, there was probably a few jump moments, whether it's like him chasing her or the part where Dick gets murdered, like just, and I called that, like I was like, oh god, the black guy's gonna die, isn't he? Like, I was like, shit. I did say that. But even though I saw it coming, I feel like it was more gruesome than I was expecting, you know? So it was like, there was a few moments, I think when he was chasing his son in the little snow maze thing too. It wasn't like a jump scare, but I was like, I genuinely don't know what's gonna happen. Does he kill his whole family? Like, I was pretty sure he was gonna die, or like he was gonna snap out of it or something, but I was like, I really couldn't figure it out because I'm like, I feel like if he really murdered his family, I would have heard that in pop culture at some point, but I really was not sure how it was going to end. So like that was the most suspenseful part for me, when I'm like, I know this is like, we're really at the climax, this is gonna end, but like I don't know what's gonna happen. So that's when I was the most at the edge of my seat, but I don't think I jumped a lot. What about you guys when you watched it as children? Like, or what were the scariest parts to you, or what would you label as the scariest parts?
I think especially being closer to age with Danny, like I mean, there's a lot that was scary for when I first watched that half, and I think for me it was more of I honestly think the scariest thing about it is just the desolation, like the ice, like oh no, like this person could take apart the radio and like take out the spark plugs. You're stuck here forever with this maniac and stuff like that. So when I was a kid, I remember being like, oh, there are ways that people could outsmart you, and yeah, you're dead, you know?
That's scary. I agree with that.
And also like hedge mazes have always kind of scared me a little bit, yeah.
Because of The Shining?
Maybe. Ooh. Yeah, probably.
Psychological moment.
Yeah, maybe. It might be. But I do like corn mazes. Anything that I could see over, I'm fine with that. But also just getting trapped, because there is this concept, I don't know if you guys have, I probably talked to you guys about it while we were watching this, but it's a new like spooky stories about the back rooms where people could clip out of reality and end up in these never-ending hallways where you just keep going. Time and space doesn't really exist there, so you just keep living and you just walk endlessly and you will never find the end. But then there's like different parts where it's so I'm always afraid of getting like trapped somewhere where I could literally never get out. So but also, I mean, just being inside of the hotel, like you get that weird feeling in the hotel too, not just in the maze, I think. Yeah.
Well, just even being post-pandemic, quote unquote. I mean, there was a time where we were all trapped at home, and it was different, but there was an outside force that we had to be like careful about. So I feel like that hits differently a little now too. Yeah.
What about you?
Nothing really like wow scary for me with it, but it's really just kind of harrowing. Yeah. Like there's long stretches where it's just kind of unrelenting. Yeah. Like the woman in the tub. Yeah. When he's chopping down the door. It's not like startling you or anything, but it just like your nerves are shot just because it's terrifying and it's not stopping.
Right. It's the dread, yeah.
Yeah. And dread, like in more subtle ways, going back to performances, it's like everyone is acting so weird. Like they're not behaving or speaking really like normal people. It's either just like wild like Jack was, or Shelley and the doctor talking. They were like very cold and clinical. Yeah. And I think that from the outset, for me, gets me in an off-kilter mood. Yeah. Like, I can see that. This is very strange. And then that kind of lends to more unpredictability. For me, that and like the way it's shot, it's very destabilizing, which kind of makes me uncomfortable in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that because it was very mundane. Like it was a normal family with problems, but like they were kind of underneath the surface. You know, hence like the doctor scene or like his, you know, admission of being sober for 6 months or whatever it was. The kids wearing Mickey Mouse. You know, like everything was just so normal, and then they're at this like grand hotel and all this crazy stuff happens too. So it's like there's layers to this movie and why it's effective.
Yeah,
like I get it.
Yeah,
because it could happen to anyone if it can happen to this dry, mundane family.
Yeah, and especially like now watching it, it's like so weird because it's like so far it seems like you know, a historical document. And so yeah, it really is kind of like, oh wow, okay, no, crazy stuff happens back then, you know. And like one of the things that I really thought was, I like, you know, say what you will about Jack Nicholson, we already said our piece with that, but like I really do feel like they did a good job of like amping up like the supernatural elements. Like I think they did a good job with that, of course.
They kept waiting for like when something else gonna happen, because like you see the twins or the blood in the elevator, and then there's like 20 minutes goes by with like nothing or whatever. That's your point. And then it's like slowly, oh, there's people in this bar all of a sudden, or whatever. It's like, what does this mean?
But could you? I mean, the sucky thing is that Danny only saw the worst stuff.
Yeah.
Because we don't even know what happened to Danny in that room. Like, so he was having to deal with, even before he got there, he saw those elevators with the blood coming out. He saw the twins who were murdered. He saw all these bad things, and then Jack, oh, cool, I get to see a party from the 1920s and stuff like that. So he has such a different experience than anyone else does in this family.
That's true.
And, I mean, and he probably felt like he was going crazy. I mean, you know, he was going crazy, you know, and, you know, I think we had talked about it before, but it was kind of revealed later. And, you know, you could, it may just be like a after the fact thing, but Tony, when he's talking as Tony, that's supposed to be him from the future, because his name is Daniel Anthony Torrance, so he went by his middle name.
Like me.
Yeah. So he was talking to himself from the future, trying to like protect him, and trying to tell him. Obviously, it doesn't work. Like it probably made things a lot worse, but you know, I think that's
and that's according to the sequel, right?
That's according to the sequel, yeah.
What's the sequel's name again?
Dr. Sleep.
Dr. Sleep.
And yeah, so that I really liked it personally, even though I mean they definitely take, because you're probably not gonna watch it, and but you know what, it's one of those things that was written. I mean, how many years later? It was written like, you know, 35 years later.
Yeah.
So, like Stephen King was probably just bored one day and was like, well, I'm going to finish whatever I think is going to happen and stuff. But it really kind of does delve more into The Shining and like how it manifests different ways in different people. Because there's other things in the Stephen King universe where The Shining actually does happen, but it's in different ways. I mean, like in The Green Mile, you know, Michael Duncan Clark's, his character has The Shining. It just manifests in a different way.
Slightly different details, but it's the same kind of thing.
Where you could transfer memories to people and stuff. So, but then you start. I don't know. I was thinking about it the other day, and I was like, I kind of like, because I've been watching Halloween as well, like the newer Halloweens, and they start like explaining like, oh, you know, like in some of the sequels, they start explaining like,
the cult.
Yeah, the Cult of the Thorn. Yeah, and they start like explaining why he's like that, and I'm like. I like it, but I get how like that mystery kind of is almost better just let it happen and see how it goes. I don't know what you guys think about that, but yeah.
I would have loved like a throwaway line, even like that sort of explained what the phenomenon was, because especially if you're not as well versed with like the supernatural, because you don't watch like horror movies all the time. That's why I had to stop once or twice and be like, what's happening? Just because I don't want to spend the movie confused. Like I'm fine for like slow storytelling or slow reveals, but it never really was labeled as like either a mental illness or supernatural power or whatever. I thought going into the movie that it was going to be about ghosts. But it's something way deeper than that, and that's never exactly labeled, so I'm glad I had two horror nerds with me to explain it to me.
Right.
Because I would have been like, wait, this doesn't even make... I think there's like slow reveals and like leaving some mystery, but then there's also completely confusing and alienating some of your audience, and I felt like... I was just glad I watched it with you guys, because I would have been way closer to the latter without you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been like, just creepy stuff's happening and we don't know why.
Yeah.
It's like a throwaway line... Kind of like an improv, just label something, call it, and then you can follow the crazy.
And I think Dick tries to explain that, but in watching this, again, like I realized that in my opinion, I feel like Jack has The Shining. Mm-hmm. He's been stifling it with the drinking, because in Doctor Sleep, that's also what...
Right, Danny does the same thing.
Danny gets into drugs, and, after the tragedy, like and people are like, oh, he's a, freak and stuff, so he gets, way into drinking and into drugs, and that's the way that he kind of gets away from it, and I think in a lot of ways Jack had The Shining as well, because I think when Dick was talking about his grandmother also had The Shining, so it is hereditary. It is hereditary. But then now you're getting into like explanation territory. Because one of my favorite scary movies is It Follows, and they explain enough. They explain the rules. They don't explain why any of it happens, but they just let it.
See, I would have liked a few rules, because like you're right, Dick did contextualize some of it for sure, but it was still like an adult talking to a kid and sort of speaking vaguely, and I'm like, no, talk to me like I'm a child who doesn't understand. So like one clarification line would have been chef's kiss for me, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I think going back to it, I think that's another one thing that Stephen King, because this book or the book wasn't necessarily supposed to center on Jack. It doesn't. It's actually more of Danny's book.
I would have liked that.
Or just like these are, because you have to see most things through his eyes because he has The Shining and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's more. I don't know. I mean, I mean, I think damned if you do, damned if you don't in a lot of ways.
What do you think?
I really like open-ended stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know, something about weird and alienating. I love weird and alienating because some stuff in The Shining is just not touched upon as far as what does this mean?
Right.
Why is this happening exactly? I like that kind of almost Lovecraftian thing of like, well, you can't know.
Yeah, it's just...
It's like trying to explain it to Lady Grimaldi here.
Yeah, that's true.
And yeah, exactly, because we have no concept of that. Mm-hmm. Just like the way, we're gonna talk about baseball with some, or to cavemen or whatever. Like they're like, wait, what? Okay. For a second, what? Okay. Numbers? What are these? But anyways, like I agree with you on that, because I mean the movie leaves you with this picture of Jack Torrance in 1924, and it's like, what? I mean, because even for me, I'm like, because I am like the person who likes to see the symbol, but even on that, I don't think anybody really knows what that means. Like, was he there the whole time, or you
just kind of get the impression of like, okay, cycle complete.
Yeah.
It's like, what is the cycle exactly?
Yeah, or like he's been written into this universe or something, absorbed into it, something. But yeah, even that doesn't feel quite right. But Clark and I did a little field trip.
Yeah, we did.
A couple days later, did I tell you this? We went to, what's the name of the hotel?
The Biltmore.
The Biltmore, where there was a scene from Ghostbusters. We were going to get some TikTok footage. If you don't follow us on TikTok, let's finally watch it. Do it. Because we're going to have some stuff coming out this week, because this was an old, beautiful hotel, but also all old, beautiful hotels are low-key creepy. And they had so many photos, because it's where the Academy Awards used to be. So they have all these like old group shots of this like ballroom, and there's like guides where it's like, look for Fred Astaire here, look for whomever here, Betty Davis. And the photos look like what The Shining was. And this is like a day or two after we watched it.
Yeah.
It was like,
it was really weird.
That's weird. Like, are we in it?
I know, it did feel really weird being there, for real. Yeah, I was getting...
It was like glitch in the Matrix, like for us going, literally, was it what, a day or two later? I think it was definitely in the same week. I don't think it was...
Yeah, no, it was like a few days later, maybe the next day, and totally, and that kind of goes back to like some of like even the imagery of it. I mean, like I always said, like the 19 teens to the 30s, like that's like spooky era. Like whenever you think of haunted houses, it's usually houses from that era. And also, like one thing that's stayed with me my entire life is the oldies playing in another room, like the jazz playing in another room. And for some reason, I listen to this all the time. There's a channel on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, well, don't do this quite yet, but
finish us first.
Finish us first, but then look up like oldies playing in another room. And for some reason, it's soothing to me. I like creepy shit all the time, so I guess like that's why. But also there's a game called BioShock 2 as well, where they are under the ocean, and it's like a cult from the 1920s and stuff. And there's constantly like this music playing in the background in another room or whatever. And that kind of creepiness of what is that? What is that other... Like there is life in this other place that we can't see or whatever, and I think that that's kind of like Stanley Kubrick really used that brilliantly. I think, in my opinion. Yeah. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's like you can't relate. At all. Like I like creepy music like that, where you're like, people listen to this? This is the scariest thing I've ever heard.
Exactly. It's like, okay, like these are like some bonker lyrics and like, and they all kind of sound the same. You can't really even distinguish what they're singing too most of the time. And it just feels like these voices from beyond.
Yeah.
And also around that time, there's also a lot of spiritualism is huge, in the 1910s, or actually probably 1890s to the 1920s or whatever. But I think that, there's definitely a lot. Because I'm thinking about like audiences when they saw this, like in the 1970s or 1980, early 1980s or whatever. Wait, when did it come out?
1980, I think.
Yeah, 1980. Right? Yeah, when audiences saw that when it came out, they were probably like, ooh, the 1920s, oh, that's a scary, that's my grandma's time or whatever,
I think it's also just because it was such a fancy time, like the 20s and the 30s. Like the 30s obviously wasn't as great financially, but like the wardrobes of people, the jazz.
The opulence,
yeah. And then like in the 30s too, like the golden age of Hollywood was starting, it was such a glamorous thing, so to juxtapose it with something creepy works, like it pops,
Yeah, it's a good backdrop.
I agree.
Something spooky. Yeah, and also like another thing that I think I had noticed it before, but like I think especially with Jack, I kind of feel like it is an analogy of like colonialism, like white supremacy. To be honest, like I know now I'm starting to get like a little abstract, but like because like there was a moment when Jack went to the bar and he was like white man's burden, and I was like, oh, like what are you being burdened by? You're here in the lap of luxury on stolen land. I mean, because when they talked about when they built it, they said that it was built on top of a literal.
That's right.
It was like a Native American cemetery, right? Yeah. Okay. And they were fighting off, Native Americans. They kept attacking and stuff because this was sacred for them.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like, when Jack Squared.
They're the same person, the character and actor.
I know. Yeah. Pretty much. But, when he's like complaining about, especially like white man's burden, like, because you see Wendy, like going back to Wendy's doing all the work and stuff like that. And his son's being traumatized. He doesn't have to do shit. He's just there,
There was also, what's interesting, and I'm just connecting now, the guy who killed his family before, who was like at the hotel talking to Jack, like he said some very inappropriate language, and I'm not saying that didn't fly in 1980, but that really did fly when that guy would have been alive.
Oh, for sure.
I'm sure that was polarizing to 1980s audiences because we still have a ways to go with like race, but we were somewhere in the middle in 1980 where like civil rights had already happened, but like we had even further way to go. So to have someone from that time period use the really bad word that white people can't say, it was like shocking. I feel like even at that time, and it was even more shocking now, but it was like, oh, that's probably someone that was a jerk that said that all the time when he was alive, and the society supported it. So, there was definitely some of that there for sure.
Yeah, so it's just a little thing that Stanley Kubrick sprinkled on,
That also is kind of vicious enough that it lends the spiritual antagonist kind of thing more of a kind of malevolence.
It's pointed. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to grab anyone. I'm going to point out these socio-political subtext of who we're going to target. Yikes.
Yeah. And I think, it's a good shorthand to be like, oh, this guy's
a bad dude.
That's a sure sign.
It's like, oh.
Don't be his best friend.
You shouldn't have fallen for it, Jack. That was his fault, and he brought his demons there, so. Also, like, the people hiring him, I would have been like, oh, no, I'm so sorry. You're gonna kill your family. I know it.
That's what I mean, though, but right from the jump, my skin was crawling. And I've seen other Jack Nicholson movies. He's not often the likable guy, but my skin's not necessarily crawling from the jump either. But I was just like, just the plucky smile and being like, oh boy, I like this job or whatever. I was like, oh my God, like exactly to Clark's point, like that's a future murderer. That's a future, like, I don't want that guy handling any of my property. What are you talking about? What were they thinking? I guess maybe there wasn't a lot of people applying, but that was just, he was creepy. He was creepy from the jump. Not in the horror movie way, in the bad man way.
Right, exactly. But hey, now that I think about it, maybe that should be the test for someone. Like, if they're like, we need to send them to this hotel to see if they could, I don't know, go to the moon or Mars or whatever. I don't know. I think that should be what NASA uses. So far, they haven't sent any psychos, right, into space? No.
They could, though. They should.
But they could,
One lady had some problems.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Do you remember? It was probably close to 20 years ago.
What happened?
This woman was an astronaut. I don't remember her name.
Oh, former astronaut, right?
Yeah.
Oh, is this the one that like drove across the country?
Yes.
Talking? Okay.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
Jody
never mind.
Arias, is that it or is that someone else?
That's somebody else.
Oh, okay. I thought
But I'm like, oh man, yeah, okay, never mind. They did send one. At least she didn't do anything in space, I guess. Or maybe the space like triggered her. It could have been
Space fever?
Oh yeah, she could have gone in space cabin.
Or that's a mentally ill person.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah.
Most of us haven't been to space, and most of us have a mental illness of some kind.
That's
Right. But yeah, those are about my thoughts. Does anybody have any?
I think the only thing we didn't talk about, although we did kind of like, there's just two things that I noticed. I'm like, why is the mom reading Catcher in the Rye? Isn't that something that you read in high school?
I wrote this down. And also for me, I didn't read Catcher in the Rye until relatively recently.
Oh, okay.
Because
so you're the mom.
I am the mom. Because I would have probably been her age. Yeah. But we didn't have to read it in high school.
I did.
But like I really think that it's always, for me, anybody who reads that book is crazy, because I think Mark David Chapman was like obsessed with that book, the one who murdered John Lennon, or assassinated John Lennon, and it's
an us versus them book.
Yeah, it really is, and that's why I never wanted to read it, and I didn't.
Also, pretentious people love that book.
I know.
Quote it. So like you're right for.
Because I think like
normies or.
I think Family Guy makes fun of that book often. And
they should. It's not as good as people claim.
Yeah. I think it's fine. I mean, because even like Franny and Zoe, the other Salinger stuff too. I'm like, but I do like Franny and Zoe a little bit better. But yeah, because they talk about like Eastern philosophies and whatever. But anyways, yeah, I did write that down. That's so
funny.
Interesting.
Great minds think alike. And then the only other thing that we touched on this a little, but like, or at least I did, but the bathroom scene where Jack Nicholson just walks in, and the woman, I get it, she's a specter or whatever the F she is, or figment of his imagination, we don't know, but I wrote, this is why men don't realize it's creepy when you invade our space. Because he walks in and she's like, I'm naked in a bathtub and I'm just soaping up, and like doesn't seem grouped out, isn't like, who are you, sir? Exactly. I'm not even offended, bodies are beautiful, but who are you, sir? Like she's just rolling with it, and I get it, she eventually turned into like someone else and he wasn't having it, but I'm like, there's just been too much imagery made by men for men. And I don't care what context this is in the movie, this just makes it stand out to me. And I'm like, this is why so many, even good men, don't understand. You can't just like come up to us and like say anything or do anything. Like there's still, trust me as a woman, there's that hit too close to home. I did not like it.
Yeah, so
good to know.
Yeah.
You guys are princes amongst men, so not these guys, but yeah, some other men's out there.
I
think that's it. I think we talked about everything. Is there anything you wanted to add to it, or anything that we missed that you're like, no, we gotta talk about this?
Real quick. This is one of those things that I think was subtly working to enhance the creepiness, but I never realized until I saw this documentary about The Shining, Room 237.
Oh, yeah.
It gets into some real crackpot stuff.
I did watch that. I mean, that's part of the reason why, with Native American,
The geography of the hotel, if you're really watching as people walk around or go into a room or leave a room, some stuff just does not make any sense.
Right.
Like it's not consistent, or it's not
like architecturally, it doesn't make sense.
I did notice that. I remember like the pantry is
a door opens the wrong way,
right,
or something like that.
And I don't know. The thing is, if they're on location, they could just do,
It was a set; they can do whatever they
want.
Which makes you think like, okay, Stanley Kubrick intentionally made something not make any sense.
Wow, yeah. Because he's meticulous. And so there's no reason for him to make a mistake.
Right.
He doesn't make a mistake. That's one of the maddening things I think about like Stanley Kubrick's and those auteurs, where they have like full control over things. It's like they don't make mistakes on purpose.
So it means something.
Yeah, it always means something. But you could drive yourself mad. I mean, like, because I did watch that a few years ago, and yeah, it's like, wow, you guys are reading into literally everything about this. I mean, some of the things did make sense, but I'm like, wow, this is really like interesting that people even picked up on that, or watched it hard enough, or I mean, I think that's what happens when you watch something enough times,
you look for more and more.
Yeah,
little things that you might.
Your brain absorbs stuff because it like already knows where the jokes are, where the like one of my favorite examples of that is my mom and I had like a good cry laugh watching Christmas Vacation for like the 12th millionth time, because the scene after the turkey's all dry and blown up and stuff and they're eating.
Yeah.
They're literally dipping the turkey in water to like
oh my god.
And like we had missed that like in previous viewings, but everyone at the table is like acting really well because they're just eating this terrible meal and they're doing different things to try to make it better. And it's so subtle and relatively brief, but it's like brilliant. But it's because you already know the blueprint and bones and jokes, and your brain has more space to see the other stuff. And if you're watching on YouTube, my dog is having social hour with two of her favorite uncles. She's like, oh yeah, that's right, my friends are here.
Yeah.
But
this is the Grimmy show. This is the new Grimmy podcast. You want to say anything? Oh, she's just going to step in that. That'll be fun. That'll be some AMSR. Is that what it is? ASMR?
I forget.
I think it's ASMR.
Okay. That's the worst thing for me. I hate it. Somebody was like, oh, you should listen to this before you go to sleep. I tried it one time, and it was like something like tapping on bowls or whatever. And I was like, no, thank you. I hate this.
Rather listen to 1920s music.
Yes, I put on some 1920s music. Yeah, some Count Basie or whatever. Like, I'm not going to listen to people eat.
That's
like,
not
oh my
a good
god.
sound.
I don't care.
People, come on.
I mean, I guess people like it, but I don't get it.
People are weird.
People are weird. You're weird.
We're all weird, just in different ways. But Jack Nicholson in this movie is the most weird.
Most weird, exactly. Okay, well, yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you guys for having me. I got some of that pent up horror talk out of me. So
I know, yeah.
And it's on season. It's actually October.
Yeah. We may be able to convince her. You're not supposed to look at my mouth. We may be able to convince Blair to watch maybe another scary movie.
Okay. There's some good ones.
Yeah, there's some good ones out there. I mean, the thing is, you weren't afraid with this movie. You might be okay with horror. Like,
maybe I've grown out of it. I don't know. Yeah. I can't remember the last time I legitimately sat down and watched a horror movie. Like, I really couldn't. I would have to think.
Yeah, maybe.
Really hard about that. So maybe like life has just been so horrifying for me that I'm like, yeah, blood in elevators, it's fine.
Right. So yeah, you might have. You might be. It might be.
Or feel safe with older movies because I know the formula that you can't outsmart it and not be freaked. I don't know. I don't think I'm ever gonna be like you guys and I'm gonna like love it in my bones, but
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is Ryan Parsons. Do you have any social media or any projects, anything you want to plug?
No.
Yeah, your Instagram's private, right?
No.
Oh, it's not? Oh, okay.
No, you can check out my Instagram. What is it? RP Parsons LTD. And it's just friend stuff, really.
If you're watching, I'll spell it out on pretty font and stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Good, yeah.
And then your...
other Clark C. Other Clark C. Yeah, I don't know. It's
Clark Canez.
Yeah. Somebody was commenting on, because we were talking about a creep who like takes pictures of people. I don't know. Like the what was that one guy from the American Apparel dude, Terry, whatever. I was like, oh, I got a new camera, and they're like, and because they were talking about, creep with the camera, and I'm like, oh, I have a camera, or die with a camera. And I was like, oh, I might have a camera. And they're like, yeah, but we looked at your Instagram. There's literally no humans on it. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. Oh my god, what are you doing? She's acting so weird right now.
She's hungry, I think. She's like, someone feed me.
Oh, that's right.
So
Where are you trying to go? Okay.
I'm Lauren-Blair, Donovan,
Okay.
Blairosaurus Rex, pretty much everywhere. And we're going to feed my dog now, I guess. So thank you for watching. And next week we're going to be watching Coco. So stay tuned for that. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.